Hello, and welcome to Remember the Film, the podcast where we talk about movies and all the things that makes them memorable. This week, we'll be talking about one of the most interesting modern directors working right now, which is David Fincher. And our film to remember for the week is a double feature between his recently released Mank, that just came out on Netflix 2 days ago, and the obviously well-known Citizen Kane, which is the movie that Mank is about. It's about the writing of Citizen Kane.
And
basically.
is obviously well known.
It's obviously really, really, really well known. If you haven't heard of it, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. Why are you listening to a movie for podcast? I don't know. But anyway, I'm Hugo Pinay, and with me, joining me this week are my usual co-hosts, Jeff Grizolrick.
Hello.
And Josh Bradley.
Hi. Hello. Hi. How are you?
Doing good. You know, our quarantine period is kind of over. The whole family is doing it okay. We've all tested negative now, so we're at least free to not isolate from each other.
We're now free to move about the country.
Yes.
Yeah. No, actually free only to move around the house. Really, but that's better than nothing.
We're happy for you, Hugo.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so happy that everyone pulled through.
Me too.
And now you can.
Me too, honestly, because there was a moment in there where it got dark because people were getting hospitalized, and even if they never got really sick, but it's still quite scary when they're in the hospital for this disease that is killing people all over the world.
For sure. Yeah.
It was stressful, but we pulled through. Anyway. Film to remember this week is, for the first time, a double feature. We thought it would be interesting to talk about Mank, which has released 2 days ago, and because we're talking about Mank, which is about Herman J. Mankiewicz, who is the one of, or arguably the only, or arguably not even one of, the writers of Citizen Kane. It depends who you listen to. If you listen to Pauline Kael, he's the only person who wrote Citizen Kane. If you listen to Orson Welles, he didn't really contribute at all. But we'll get into that discussion later. So we're going to be talking about Citizen Kane first, and then Mank, and then sort of talk about how Mank informs our view of Citizen Kane and all that. But anyway, we're starting with Citizen Kane. What do I need to say about this? It was released in 1941 and is largely considered one of the greatest films ever made. It's usually either the number one or number two spot, with Vertigo and those kinds of movies. But let's just start simple. What did you guys think of Citizen Kane? Had you seen it before, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
I have seen it before, yeah, and I think it gets better every time. Like it's really good. A lot of older movies that have certain reputations. Like I watch them, I'm like, okay, I can see why people like that, but like I don't know, it feels like homework. Citizen Kane doesn't really feel like homework. It's like really, really entertaining and snappy, and it's really enjoyable.
So it's funny that you mentioned that Citizen Kane doesn't feel like homework to you, because the first time I watched Citizen Kane, it literally was homework. I had to watch it in high school for my English class, a literature class, and they for some reason decided that Citizen Kane should be a topic in a high school English class. So we had to watch it for that, and I think part of the reason I didn't enjoy it as much in high school is, one, because I was in high school and therefore an idiot. But two,
checks out.
I was being forced to overanalyze things, and obviously this movie is a movie that is worth analyzing, and it does have some really great symbolism in both the way it's shot and the way it's lit, and and all sorts of great things that are worth talking about. But being kind of forced to do it, I didn't enjoy the experience in high school. I did enjoy it more this time. I think it's tough to go back and approach a movie, especially one this iconic, that has been referenced or built off of in so many ways for so many other movies for so many years. It's tough to go back and approach it with fresh eyes. So I don't think I will ever be able to fully appreciate it the way that people did when it was new, or in the few years after it was new, when people started to realize, what it actually was doing for cinema.
Right. Yeah, I think that I think I first saw it in high school as well, or not for a class, but I was high school age, and I also didn't care much for it the first time I saw it. You know, kind of like you said. A friend of mine teaches high school right now, and he teaches this movie to his students, and he says that most of them usually like it most years, which I think is really remarkable that a movie from 1941, like high schoolers in 2020, can like find things to like about it. I think that kind of speaks to the movie's power and its staying power. Hugo, what do you think?
And I think it depends. Yeah, I think it depends on how you teach it as well, because if you provide enough context and explain beforehand what it's doing and why it's so significant, I think people are going to appreciate it more. If you just show teenagers this movie with no context, they'll just say, "Oh, this is old, black and white, and some of the acting is a bit hammy, and I don't like it." Because if you don't explain what Citizen Kane is doing to a modern audience that isn't as interested in filmmaking, and not just, you know, it's not that they just don't enjoy movies. Maybe they enjoy movies, but maybe they're not interested in filmmaking. They might just see, oh, it's a movie, and it feels relatively modern, and it's just a movie. But I think if you provide enough context and you explain what this movie is and what it was able to do at the time, then it's impossible to not be in awe of it. It's difficult to not appreciate.
I think that most people nowadays, I doubt many people are just like discovering Citizen Kane like out of nowhere. Like no one watches this movie without knowing how renowned it is. Like people in 2020 are only coming to Citizen Kane because they hear it's one of the greatest movies ever made, and they want to check out what that means and whether it's worthy of that. And and I think it's interesting that, I mean, we can discuss this. I think that most people come to it with that understanding, and it like holds up to that scrutiny. Like people come to it thinking it's the best movie, it's one of the best movies ever, and like it doesn't really disappoint. Or like even if you don't like love it or connect with it, you know, in today's modern times or whatever, and you know, whatever filmmaking style you're used to, you can still like acknowledge, wow, this is really good, even if it's not for me.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And I think that was my experience, because I saw it 3 days ago for the first time ever, and I don't feel like I connected to the characters. I don't feel I had a bit of a disconnect to the time frame in which it was set, because I don't know, I'm not an expert in 1930s American politics, and so I can't really connect.
Neither
to
am
that.
I. I doubt Grizz is either. For the
record. But even if you don't connect, you know, to the characters, or if you don't connect emotionally to it, what it's actually doing from a filmmaking standpoint is so impressive, even by modern standards, that it I don't know. I think it's impossible not to appreciate if you go into it with the right context.
The only thing I will say that is going to probably set my opinion apart from y'all's is that for me, the things that I like best about the movie have very little to do with the actual story or the performances. So for me, not that the story's bad or anything like that. The story is a good story, but to me, the story isn't, you know, the iconic part of this movie. It's all about the way it was shot. And so for me, like, since I'm trying to look at it from a complete package perspective, it gets a lot of points for the way it was made, but for me, it loses a little bit of points for just not, you know, and again, it could be just because having watched it years and years later than it came out, you know, maybe it's seen it referenced too many other ways to be able to see it from that angle. But that's the only drawback for me, is that the story is a little self-important, and to me that is a slight drawback for my enjoyment. But again, all of that is made up for by how well the movie's made, especially when you find out more and more about the stuff that went into it, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. But that's like the only downside for me.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how good this movie looks. The cinematography is crazy, especially if you've, like, you know, seen any other movies from around the late 30s, early 40s. Like, just nothing looked like this at the time, and even some movies today don't like look this good. I think whether it be like the composition or the deep focus or the dramatic lighting. Yeah, it looks amazing. And again, if you come to this movie expecting it to be, knowing that it's one of the best movies ever made, like that kind of probably puts you in a different mindset to appreciate the shots more than you might in a given movie. Yeah, and it doesn't disappoint at all. It's the cinematography is crazy good. Greg Toland was the cinematographer in this, and apparently he liked working with first-time directors because they like didn't know the rules, and so he could kind of do whatever he wanted. And this movie like broke the rules, quote unquote, cinematography wise, and it worked out okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like in a lot of ways it rewrote the rules because going forward, you can see a lot of stuff are influenced by the way things are lit and shot in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the Spielberg oneer in our Spielberg episode and how it's like, a minute or 2 minute long take that doesn't cut, but like kind of has like, the blocking changes throughout the shot, so like that you kind of have different compositions in one shot, and you see that a lot here. Like I'm thinking about when he's a kid, and like there's a shot of him like playing with the snowballs, and the camera pulls back out the window, and the mom follows the camera, and it's awesome. It's really good stuff.
It's great stuff, and I think it's interesting that we happened to have this connection between Citizen Kane and a David Fincher episode, because David Fincher is a director who does those incredibly complicated long takes, and he takes it. I think what's interesting is that in the way that Orson Welles and Greg Toland and the people who worked on this movie innovated with these long takes that were done with really interesting practical effects. Because if you look at the making of, the way that specific shot was made was basically the camera is pressed against the glass and it looks outside at the kid playing, and then it pulls back, and then it goes over a table. And that theoretically at the time wouldn't be possible, but the way they had to do it is they had this table that opened up and then it closed back up, and so the camera could move between it. And that is, in many ways, what Fincher does today. But the way he attaches these incredibly complicated long shots is that he uses live action, and then he introduces a digital, a CGI shot that simulates live action and continues the shot. And he edits them together to make it look like it's one unbroken shot. So it's really interesting that we just happened to put these two together, because I
don't think it's a coincidence.
Innovation. No, it's not a coincidence, because obviously David Fincher is really inspired by this film in particular, and it's no wonder that he decided to make a movie about it. But but it is an interesting thing to notice.
I also wanted to point out that Hugo, I didn't know that about the table for that shot in particular, but the very famous shot that like kind of booms up into like the nightclub where Susan Alexander is singing in modern day, and like kind of it moves through like the sign. A big sign of her name, and the camera moves through that, and that was a breakaway sign where like the camera approaches the sign, and once it's like right up on it, it breaks apart in two pieces, and they move it out of the way so the camera can keep moving forward more,
which is similar to the table. I mean,
which is awesome. Like people are really smart.
I wanted to talk a little bit about with the lighting in particular, and maybe one of you will have more insight on it. Is this a difficult way for actors to perform with the way things are lit in this? Is it harder for them with like in several shots, like I have one on the screen right now where very clearly there is a bright light that is definitely shining in the face of the guy who's sending out the reporter on the to go find out what Rosebud is.
Yes.
The light of the projector is lighting him up, so he is 100% being blinded. Did actors have problems with this, with the lighting being so drastic?
I haven't heard any stories of actors having problems with that, but I would imagine it wasn't the easiest conditions to work in. In particular, I'm thinking about a shot where the reporter goes to see Susan Alexander the first time, and she like refuses to talk to him, and there's a shot where he's like inside the phone booth in the foreground, completely in shadow, you can't see his face,
right,
and in the background behind him you can still see Susan Alexander very well lit. And to have that kind of sharp focus in the foreground and the background, which Citizen Kane does a lot, it's just the deepest focus you've ever seen. To have that kind of focus in the background, you have to have really intense light. The further you are from the camera, the more intense the light has to be. So the fact that she's like well lit far in the background, like that light had to be very, very intense and very hot.
She's practically baking back there.
Yes. Again, I don't know any I haven't heard any firsthand accounts of actors complaining about that, but that is a reality of what they had to do.
But I feel like there's also an element of Orson Welles. This is his debut film. We'll talk about that too. That's crazy. But aside from that, he came from theatre. So the really aggressive, intense lighting is probably something that he had in his background, more so than probably movie directors or movie actors even had. I think
the lighting in here is definitely very theatrical.
Very theatrical. And the fact that it changes during the scene.
One thing. Very theatrical.
I love that how it changes during a scene in a way that isn't realistic at all. That doesn't make sense, but it works for the dramatic effect of the scene. It breaks all the rules, because if you look at a movie from this time, even the movies that look really good, like let's take, I don't know, John Ford movies or that type of thing, which look great to this day, the camera doesn't move this way. The camera just doesn't move this way at all. And the focus is not this way. There's a background and there's a foreground. And when the scene has to change the blocking, either the camera moves in a really linear way or they cut. And this film just feels completely different to those movies. And it has this dynamic effect that a lot of these movies don't have. A lot of old movies, one of the things that makes them hard to get into is that they look static. They look still, and so it can be a bit jarring for a modern audience. And
dramatic
and
angles
another thing too. Dramatic angles as well. Yes.
Yeah,
there's always an interesting angle that they use for everything.
And again, most movies at the time are shot kind of more at eye level, and Citizen Kane is not. And I think that they used fake ceilings. The ceilings were just cloth. And that way they could put lights and microphones behind the fake ceiling to, one, help light the scene better, two, get better sound quality when the camera's pointed at the ceiling, because it's looking up at the character, and that's not the kind of angle you usually see in the 1940s.
No.
I also wanted to touch on how this movie pioneered visual effects before the concept of visual effects was really even a thing. I love, in particular, I don't know if you guys have ever watched the series VFX Artist React on from Corridor Crew on YouTube. They are special effects artists, and they do funny videos using special effects on YouTube, stuff like that. But on this series, they talked about Citizen Kane in one episode, and particularly the thing that stuck out to me from that episode was when they discussed the audience at Kane's big speech when he's running for office. And you can see in the movie, the audience appears that it's moving, but they didn't film that in front of a stadium full of people. They had a plate that of an audience where they had cut out the outline or just the edge around some of the people, and they moved a light source behind it to make the lighting and shading change in the background of the picture to make the audience look like it was moving. That is insane. How do you think to do that?
Yeah, I think Roger Ebert said that there's as many special effects shots in Citizen Kane as there are in one of the original Star Wars movies.
I 100% believe that.
That makes sense.
In particular, I think there's a lot of matte paintings, and that's a thing. There was a thing in the 40s and 30s and 50s, matte paintings to give a sense of scale and landscapes and everything. Most shots of Xanadu, his home, unless it's a close-up of a window or something like that, most shots showing the complex are hand-drawn.
Right.
The opening shots, it shows Xanadu out in the distance, and you get progressively closer. Every one of those is a hand-drawn of his mansion.
But yeah, so I'm that's another one of those things that earned points with me, is that there's all these great visual effects that you see they hold up despite being so mechanical rather than computer enhanced. It's really crazy.
Oh, you cut out for me for a second there.
I didn't cut out. I was done talking.
Yeah. So, oh, right, yeah, but there was a weird. I think I lost your last word, and so I didn't know to say you were done. But anyway, so we all agree Citizen Kane, pretty good.
Pretty good.
Pretty good. No, I mean, yeah, obviously it's fantastic and it's a landmark and, worth talking about for hours. But for the purpose of this podcast, let's move on to our second part of our double feature of a film to remember this week, which is Mank, the recently released David Fincher film. And I don't know, how did you guys feel about this? I can start if you want.
Yeah, please.
But so, I don't know. I feel like 2020 is just a year where stuff doesn't work out. Because all the movies that I was so excited about for this year got delayed or didn't get released. And the few that did, which is Tenet and Mank, basically, I didn't love them. I thought Mank was good. It was well made. I appreciate some of the ideas. I appreciate the fact that it was filmed structurally. It was filmed in the same way as Citizen Kane. I think it's really cool that he uses the same framing device of something happening in the present, and then the actual story being told through flashbacks, little episodes of this man's life. But I thought it was relatively conventional for a Fincher film. I didn't think it had the same visual flourishes that a lot of his movies have, and I don't know. And I also thought the editing was a little messy sometimes. Like, it was hard to follow, and I think the main criticism that I have of it actually is the story, which is very difficult to follow unless you have at least a passing interest in 1930s, the studio system and 1930s politics. And, there were moments where they were name dropping famous people that I didn't know who they were. And I did get a bit lost. But
not know who Scott Fitzgerald is?
I don't know, like some of the actors, some of the studio execs, or Upton Sinclair, who was the candidate, or
so you should
interesting.
Yeah, you should have heard of Upton Sinclair.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not even like as a political candidate, but as an author, he is.
Right.
He took on the meatpacking industry, and
I honestly didn't know he was ever a political candidate.
Yeah, I'm sure I had heard that.
And
at
it
some
might
point,
be,
but
it might be that I'm not from America, because I had a hard time following that stuff. But regardless of that, I don't that stuff is maybe more of a personal thing for me. But anyway, so I couldn't fully get into it. But anyway, I do really appreciate the fact that he made this movie, because it's definitely a passion project of his, and it's really interesting. It was a script written by his father, who died before they were able to make the film together. So I'm sure he got a lot of joy out of making this film, and I also think that Gary Oldman is, as usual, absolutely brilliant in it. But what did you guys think?
Grizz?
I really enjoyed the movie. And it could be just, again, that I am an American, so maybe I've heard of more of these people. But I found it fascinating, and all the stuff about I guess I'm a sucker for Hollywood drama, so all the stuff with Mayer, and how like I didn't know, having watched Citizen Kane, that Bernstein is loosely based on Mayer. That's so interesting.
I didn't get that either. I didn't get that until his drunken speech around the dinner table.
The party.
Only then did I realize, oh shit, Louis B. Mayer is Bernstein.
Yeah, and
great scene. By the way,
to me that part clicked when at the party where they're talking about Upton Sinclair, and Mayer gives a speech about how great William Randolph Hearst is, and I'm like, oh my god, yeah, it's just like Bernstein, always bloviating about how good Charles Foster Kane is. And so that really clicked with me, and I also just really enjoyed in general seeing the parallels with Citizen Kane, because Citizen Kane is obviously based on Hearst and his empire, but it was really fun to see just how much they paralleled, and like, how could anyone not have realized that this was about Hearst? There's no way.
Yes. I'm not sure. I actually I knew obviously that like William Randolph Hearst tried to get Citizen Kane shut down, and like a lot of it partially was responsible for why the movie wasn't a financial success, is because people like movie theaters didn't want to upset William Randolph Hearst. Like I knew all that, but I'm not sure I knew how directly that was baked into the creation of the movie.
Yeah, it
like,
was so correlated.
Yes. I mean, at least according to the movie Mank, Herman Mankiewicz. First of all, I had no idea that the creators of Citizen Kane like had personal relationships with William Randolph Hearst,
right?
And like really did write it as an FU to the guy, you know?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Again, if Mank is to be believed.
Yes, exactly, and so we had to take that with a grain of salt because we're looking through the glasses of the future here. But
right.
I really enjoyed the story, which to me is almost like, for me personally, is almost always the most important thing for me to enjoy a movie, is to be fully invested in the story. I love that. I think Mank is a likable character, still flawed.
Yes.
Which is important to keep a character interesting. But he's clearly a drunk, and but he's so clever, and I love clever writing, and this movie has that in spades. So,
amazing dialogue. Amazing dialogue.
The dialogue is fantastic.
Very snappy.
The dialogue is amazing.
And I mean, we'll talk about The Social Network later, and that's written by Aaron Sorkin, who's one of my favorite writers.
Yes. Same.
This movie is not written by Sorkin, but the dialogue was still very Sorkin-esque in how witty and how everybody is really smart.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that it's interesting where you two are on Mank. I think that I am kind of somewhere between you, but moving towards Grizz's perspective. I watched it last night, and then I watched the first 20 minutes a second time. And I like my rewatch so far a lot better than my first watch. And I think it's because I was expecting the movie to be one thing, and it's not really that. And Grizz, it's interesting you say that Mank is like a good guy and like a, not really a bad dude. I was expecting him to be a bad dude.
Right.
This is a David Fincher movie after all. He's most of his movies are pretty cynical and, kind of barbed, and Mank isn't. It's just like a pretty nice movie for the most part. And
ironically, I think that the movie is not cynical, but Mank himself is cynical.
Yes.
And so it kind of like, I see a little bit of Fincher in the character of Mank, which is kind of cool.
Right. And so like
Mank is a man out of his time. He's a man who has progressive ideas that were frowned upon within the studio system, and so he had to keep them for himself, and he couldn't really express them as much as he wants. And when he decides to do that, he pisses off everybody with Citizen Kane.
Sorry, Josh, we keep cutting you off. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was just gonna say that like I think that I finished the movie the first time, and like my wife really liked it, which is great. I like when she likes movies. She's a sucker for old Hollywood stuff, so she liked it immediately, and I liked it. But what I said to her was I felt like something was maybe missing, and I wanted to watch a second time to maybe if I could like figure out what that was. And I think what was missing for me the first watch is I was just like I was kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was expecting like Mank to fall from grace at some point, or again for the movie to get mean or cynical, and it kind of never did. And so that's not the movie's fault that I was expecting that and it didn't happen. Like it's again like I think the wrong expectation for me is what kind of hurt my first impression. But like as I'm starting to watch a second time, I like it a lot more. And like so I just want people to like kind of take the movie on its terms. It's also not really about like the disputed authorship of Citizen Kane, really. Like I kind of thought that would be like a major point in the movie, and that's like a small footnote in the overall story. It's more just like about this guy, sticking it to the man to some extent by writing this movie as a big FU to this guy that he disagrees with,
Well, and it's about sticking to your guns too.
Yeah, your principles, exactly.
Originally, when he signed on to do the movie, he had agreed to not receive a writing credit because he just needed a job, and Orson Welles offered it to him. So as word gets out that he's working on this movie and the script gets out there and people, his family, his friends come to talk to him and they're all mad at him for doing this, but they also all say it's the best thing he's ever done. Go ahead, Josh.
Right. And it's interesting that, Citizen Kane, the movie Citizen Kane, the character Charles Foster Kane begins the movie as a bit of an idealist. He, famously publishes his 2 like principles on the front page of his paper, committing himself to a certain standard. And then by the end of the movie, he's completely abandoned those, and he's, using the paper to his advantage, try to shape public opinion the way he sees, the way he wants it to be, and abandons his principles. And Mank, on the other hand, finds principles. Like one of my favorite early scenes is when him and his team of writers are pitching to David O. Selznick, and like they're supposed to have been working on this story for like a while, and then they just walk in the room completely unprepared and just pitch him a movie off the top of their heads.
Love it.
And really great scene, but like that kind of gives you a sense of what Mank's priorities are. He's too busy drinking and gambling to like take his job seriously, but then he finds principles throughout the movie when he encounters something that he thinks is, repugnant and wrong, and uses his powers of screenwriting to fight that.
Yeah, he's the opposite of Charles Foster Kane.
Yes.
And I think that's part of the reason I enjoyed it so much was I like stories about good guys, and or about redemption even, and we get that here.
And I think I would have liked the movie more on first watch if I like wasn't expecting him to not be a good guy.
Yeah.
Or I was expecting the movie to be more barbed and cynical than it actually is. It's actually like a pretty nice movie, which is not your standard, but it's good. Yeah.
And maybe that's where I'm feeling a disconnect from it, because I really enjoy a good heartwarming story. Steven Spielberg, we talked about it. He's one of my favorite directors ever. But Fincher also is one of my favorite directors.
Me too, for sure.
I'm feeling a little bit conflicted about the fact that this movie is probably going to be what finally wins David Fincher an Oscar. I'm not sure how you feel about it, but in a year where not many movies released, and it's it's a big classical story about Hollywood.
It's about Hollywood.
It's about Hollywood and the making of one of the most beloved films of all time, and it's black and white, and it stars Gary Oldman.
And it's about it's also it's about sticking it to people who try to use the media for nefarious purposes, which in 2020 feels important. So that's another.
Oh yeah, and I'm not saying,
column.
Yeah, I'm not saying that all that stuff is bad. I'm just saying the fact that this film might get an acknowledgement that other films in David Fincher's filmography didn't get is. It bothers me a little bit, because I think he's one of the best, if not the best, genre directors working right now, and he's going to get the most recognition in terms of awards with a drama.
What do you mean,
a classical Hollywood drama? Well, he makes mystery thrillers. You know what I mean? Well, he's probably the best mystery thriller director working right now, I would say.
Let's not use Mank's theoretical future Oscars as hold that against the movie. I think
no, and I'm not okay, and I'm not holding it against the movie.
I'm
not holding it against the movie. I still think the movie is fantastic. I just sort of, I'm not sure if that's what I'm looking for when I go see a Fincher film. And I think the movie on its own, separate from the fact that it was made by David Fincher, is fantastic. It's really good. But then when I think about David Fincher, I'm looking for Mindhunter.
Do we want to transition into the Fincher discussion?
It'll happen naturally. I still want to talk a little bit more about Mank, but I think it'll happen naturally. I agree with you. Like, I think there was a time in my life when I kind of like held The Departed a bit at arm's length because it won Scorsese Best Picture and Best Director, and The Departed is not in my top 5 Scorsese, but like, who cares? I mean, I think it's great. I love it too, but it's not Raging Bull, Goodfellas, or Taxi Driver. That's just a fact of life.
No.
But also like, who cares? Like it's. I love the Oscars. I obsess over them every year, and I hold them in higher regard than most people. But also, like, they don't matter in the scheme of things.
They don't.
Is Mank better? I mean, we'll talk about our Fincher ranking, but like, Mank is not in my Fincher top 5 either. But like, I also just kind of want Fincher to win an Oscar at some point,
Oh, absolutely, and I'll be really happy for him if he wins it with this film that feels really personal to him.
Mm-hmm. That's another thing is like, I mentioned that I've begun a rewatch, and I already like it a lot more now that I kind of know what to expect. But I also want to like watch this through the eyes of this is a movie written by the director's father, who is, you know, 15 years past. That's interesting. And, you know, his father... Fincher's given a lot of interviews this week, you know, talking about his dad and, like, how they always talked about his dad was of the opinion that Citizen Kane is the best movie of all time, and that's not disputable. Like, that's not something you can, like, have a conversation about. It's just a fact. And, like, I think Fincher and his dad were, like, having a conversation about Raising Cain, the famous Pauline Kael book-length movie review about the disputed authorship, and, you know, Fincher's father was very interested in that, so David Fincher said, "Hey, write a movie about it. Like, you think this story needs to be, you know, better known, then write it." And the fact that Fincher tried to get this made when Jack Fincher was still alive in the late '90s, but couldn't get it made until he was long dead, I kind of wonder, you know, if you watch this with that lens, if there are things in the movie that you could pick up on that kind of, not to psychoanalyze David Fincher too much, but, like, I wonder if there are things that let you psychoanalyze David Fincher a little bit. It's just a very loaded thing, you know?
And I completely agree with that. And as I said, I'm happy for the man that he got to make this film. Even if it's not necessarily what I want from him personally, I'm really happy that he did make it and that he did get to complete this idea. And I think it's really interesting that Netflix is the place where these types of movies are able to exist in a way that, you know, he didn't manage to get it made in the 90s or in the beginning of the 2000s, you know, and you know, Alfonso Cuarón didn't manage to make Roma outside of Netflix. He made it with Netflix because it's
The Irishman.
Really... And The Irishman, I think, is a different situation. I have opinions on The Irishman, but
I think that I think what you're
but I
saying is
understand
that
what you mean.
Netflix is willing to throw more money at filmmakers to make their passion projects that other studios just aren't willing to do. Netflix is working with different kind of margins, different kind of accounting, and you also have to, you know, point out that David Fincher kind of earned this. You know, he made House of Cards, he made Mindhunter. He earned his keep with Netflix, and, like, as a reward, they're giving him the money he wants to make the movie he's been wanting to make for 20 years, apparently.
Yeah, but even with House of Cards and Mindhunter, they're giving him free reign to make a David Fincher project through and through. And so, you know, I think I appreciate that about them, even if, you know, I'm not a huge fan of the idea of everything becoming streaming, but I appreciate that Netflix gives these interesting filmmakers the money to make what they want, you know?
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
I wonder how much... Yeah, go ahead, Rios.
Sorry. Go ahead. Finish your thought, because I
just want to say, I wonder how much free reign he had with House of Cards, because that is a TV show made by an algorithm. It's not an accident that it was that popular, because Netflix has all of our data and all of our preferences. They know exactly who the most popular actors are, who the most popular filmmakers are, and what the most popular topics are. So they basically said, okay, we need Kevin Spacey in a movie in a TV show about politics. And David Fincher's also really popular, so let's let him do it. So, yeah, those three things, I think if we put them together, it'll be a hit. And they were exactly right. That was a hit. So, again, I wonder how much free reign he had, or if they're just like, hey, these parameters, because this is what the algorithm tells us, and go. And
that's true. That's
can't argue the result.
But it's also really well made.
Yeah.
So I'm not mad about it. You know what I mean? Because if it was, it doesn't feel like a cash grab, even if it is to a certain extent.
Everything is a cash grab. Everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
exactly.
Let's not be cute here.
No one makes a movie to lose money.
Right.
Yeah.
Except the producers.
Springtime.
Except the people who are giving money to Zack Snyder right now. But let's forget about that.
Okay, well, so my question was regarding Oscars.
Okay, go ahead, sorry.
Do we think Gary Oldman? I mean, we're pretty confident he's going to get a nomination for this, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
what about Amanda Seyfried?
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe.
I think she can get a nomination for supporting actress here.
Yeah, for sure.
I think she's really good. I think she was really good, and you know, I do think sometimes the acting performances are a bit snobbed when it comes to Netflix movies. I don't know. It's just sort of a thing that I tend to notice.
This year might force some hands in that regard.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say this year, I think Mank is going to get a lot of attention, and it's not undeserved. So, you know,
I think actually her chances of winning an Oscar are better than Gary Oldman's. I mean, that's kind of a different conversation about.
No, I agree, especially with Oldman having won so recently.
Well, he won a couple years ago.
Who would you put up against him though this year?
Well, I mean, the current betting odds and the current narrative is that Chadwick Boseman's going to win a posthumous best actor for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which most people haven't seen yet. I haven't seen yet, but that's just kind of like that's just like the consensus at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes acting Oscars are kind of just decided by consensus months in advance. See Renee Zellweger and Judy last year. They just kind of decided in September, hey, she's probably going to win an Oscar for this. And then that narrative never changed, over 5 months. Yeah. And so Gary Oldman to win Best Actor would have an uphill battle against a beloved, now tragically passed actor. Yeah. And, the fact that he won 2 years ago or 3 years ago is not in his favor either. So, again, I think I have no idea who's going to run supporting actress this year. I don't know what Amanda Seyfried's competition would be, but I think I like her chances of winning more than Gary.
I'm always surprised by her as an actress.
She's great, man.
How good she is.
Me too.
And I think
she's great.
It just stems from the first place I remember seeing her was Mean Girls.
Same, man. Yeah, Karen.
And she was great in Mean Girls, but
okay. So I thought you was going to say something bad about Mean Girls.
That's the girl from Mean Girls.
Yeah. I mean, all due respect to everyone that I'm about to mention, but Lacey Chabert, another person in Mean Girls, is now doing Hallmark movies, and I don't expect, a level. I don't know. Amanda Seyfried's done really well for herself, and good for her.
She's done great. So, okay, now we have an interesting part because we have to rank our films to remember, and our current ranking is. I think we should do one at a time. Start with Citizen Kane and then do Mank. Okay, so our current ranking is The Thing at number 1, Rudy at number 2, Jackie Brown at number 3, and The Sugarland Express at number 4. And I'd like just to start saying I probably like The Thing more than Citizen Kane, but I can't argue against Citizen Kane being number 1 against this competition.
Without explaining anything, just tell me where you put Citizen Kane, both of you.
So the problem becomes, what is this list about? Is it the movie we liked best, or is it the best movie?
I think, since it's going to
use your judgment.
Since it's going to get stupid because we're just going to pile on movies on this list, I think we should go by enjoyment.
Okay.
And I think, but it still has to be a balance,
Yeah, I mean,
so,
obviously,
I
take that into consideration.
It's a tough choice.
I enjoy Rudy more than Citizen Kane.
Oh, God.
I do. I'm completely biased in that regard because Rudy means so much to me. So if it was purely based on enjoyment, I would put Rudy ahead of Citizen Kane. But I also know what Citizen Kane means to cinematic history, and I'm not going to put Rudy above Citizen Kane. So I think I would probably have to put it at number 1, even though I technically enjoy the other movies more. I'm more inclined to watch those again than Citizen Kane.
Right. Yeah. I think I'm okay with number 1.
I think I'm kind of thinking of this list as a recommendations list.
Yeah.
How would I rank these? If you haven't seen any of these, how would I rank them in terms of which ones you should prioritize seeing? Which kind of
way of looking at it.
It's a bit of an amalgamation of what I personally think about it and also what other people think about it. So I can't not put Citizen Kane number 1. I probably would anyway, but Citizen Kane number 1 for sure for me.
Yeah, I agree. I like that idea, looking at it from this is our recommendations, for movies that you should watch. Everyone should watch Citizen Kane. Everyone should
definitely
watch it.
Yeah.
Hundy P.
So we have Citizen Kane at number 1 now, and then we have Mank, which I think is interesting because I find it a bit difficult because the list is starting to get complicated because I wouldn't put it above Jackie Brown, but I would put it above Rudy. So within the context of the list, I would put it at number 3. Above Rudy, below The Thing.
Go ahead, Josh.
And you guys are going to argue that to put it below Rudy, and I'm going to cry.
No, I mean, that's also complicated. Personally, I would recommend Rudy before I'd recommend Mank if we're going to talk about the list in those terms.
Right.
But I mean, what's complicated is that we all just saw Mank like a day ago or something like that, and these other movies have been in the cultural consciousness for minimum 25 years, or 23 years, whatever. And so, how do you place that? Mank hasn't percolated in my head enough. Like I said, I've only just begun a rewatch and already feel better about it than I did on the first viewing. So I don't know. My instinct is to put it behind Jackie Brown, but I don't really know. This is a dumb thing we're doing, but we're doing it anyway. Yeah, it's fun.
That's the point. It's dumb.
That's the point.
Fun.
It has to be stupid. I'm okay with it below Jackie Brown. I love Jackie Brown.
I would put it above Jackie Brown personally.
Right.
So I think this averages out to between Rudy and Jackie Brown then, based on
it does, yes.
Answers.
Okay. I think it would.
That's cool.
I think it would, yes.
I like that.
So we have Mank below Rudy, and so our list is now Citizen Kane, The Thing, Rudy, Mank, Jackie Brown, and the Sugarland Express.
Mank above Jackie Brown. Cool. Yeah, I like that. That's cool.
But the problem is not Mank above Jackie Brown, but let's not, pour salt on old
Hugo,
wounds.
You're trying to make it out like you didn't enjoy Rudy. You had fun with it. Stop acting like you didn't have fun with Rudy.
Rudy was fine.
It's a seminal classic. It's a seminal classic.
It is.
And it's
absolutely
it's
fine.
And also, go Irish, 10-0.
10-0, baby.
Playoffs, baby. Well, I shouldn't say playoffs yet, but
conference championship.
Really? They're going undefeated.
First year in a conference, we're already running the place. What's up, boys? Where you at?
I have no idea what that means, but fine. Okay, so we don't have a lot of time left, but I mean, we were expecting this because talking about two movies and talking about Citizen Kane, which is so important and there's so much to say, we were expecting to probably not have a lot of time at the end of the show to talk about David Fincher. So what we thought we should do in this case, if we didn't have a lot of time left, was just quickly list off our top 5 Fincher films and just react to each other's list and see what we think. Okay. So who wants to start?
With 5?
We'll start with 5.
No, I think we should go 5 to 1, and you just say your whole list and we react to it because
start
we
with
don't
5.
have a lot of time. So yeah, start with 5.
I don't have mine written down, but I'll just go off the top. Number 5, right. Gone Girl. Yeah, Gone Girl 5. Let's go 7-4. Fight Club 3.
7-4.
Yeah, Fight Club 3. 1 and 2 are pretty interchangeable, so let's go Zodiac 2 and Social Network 1.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Grizz?
I also agree. Gone Girl 5.
Nice.
I have Mank as my 4th favorite Fincher movie.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. Interesting.
7 I have at 3rd. Then The Social Network, and then Fight Club. And this week I watched a bunch of Fincher movies, and I rewatched Gone Girl, and because when I first watched Gone Girl, I gave it a 9 out of 10. I really enjoyed it, and I still really enjoyed it the second time, but I think I definitely didn't enjoy it as much, and before I went to rewatch it, I started thinking like, I don't even really remember that much about the movie. All I remember is I really liked it. So, so I'm glad I rewatched it. But now I'm much more confident in my rankings.
I like Gone Girl more the more times I watch it, and I've seen it probably 4 or 5 times now, and it gets better and better for me. I love that movie, man.
What do you got, Hugo?
So my list is at 5 I have The Girl with Dragon Tattoo. At 4, I have Gone Girl. At 3, I have Zodiac. At 2, I have Fight Club. And at 1, I have 7.
Cool.
So Social Network is not on my list.
Network. Oh, it's not.
I don't.
He doesn't have
Social Network on my list. No.
Hugo doesn't have Social Network. Grizz doesn't have Zodiac, which are my 1 and 2. So you guys are both crazy. But we both, all 3 of us have 7, Fight Club, and Gone Girl.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
Zodiac was my 6.
I was expecting to be in the minority with Gone Girl in my top 5, but I'm glad this is a Gone Girl podcast. Cool. Yeah.
Gone Girl, I think,
Gone
is
Girl stands.
So my list, you will notice, is all thrillers because that's the type of film that I gravitate towards.
Where's Panic Room on your list?
Panic Room is 7.
Okay.
So it's 6 Social Network, Panic Room 7.
Okay, so real quick, so Social Network is 6 for Hugo and Zodiac is 6 for Grizz. Okay. Yeah. That makes me feel a little bit better.
So they're all close. I don't think Social Network is worse than any of the films in my top 5. I just enjoy those genres more, and so that's my list. But
Well,
I mean, Social
I wanted to
Network
touch on
is
this from
another
earlier.
excellent film.
Earlier, you said that he was, he's a thriller director, and
Yes,
Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Social Network, and now Mank. We're looking at a huge chunk of his filmography is not thrillers.
That's fair, but it's 3 out of 10 is not thrillers, and
That's
the rest
pretty
is
good chunk in the
It is a good
scheme
chunk. It is a good chunk. What I was saying is not that he is a thriller director. I don't want to pigeonhole him in that sense, but I do. What I'm saying is he's one of the best thriller directors.
He is in the thriller
once
genre.
He decides to make a thriller, it's so well directed, and his sensibility works perfectly for that genre. Which doesn't mean that he doesn't make great dramas, because I do think his dramas are really good as well. But you know what I mean? I was saying that in that sense, not that he can't make a drama or that he shouldn't.
So I kind of wanted to ask, what happened with Alien 3?
Everything.
Why is it so mediocre?
Everything.
Well, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it, first of all.
Do you know the stories about Alien 3, Grizz?
No, that's what I'm asking.
Are you actually genuinely asking? Okay. Alien 3, basically, he had ideas for the film, and then the studios wouldn't allow him creative freedom at all. And most of what the film is now are reshoots that were done without him.
He
they were directed. Yeah. He doesn't acknowledge it as part of his filmography, and he didn't participate in what they call the special edition, which is supposedly closer to his original vision, but he didn't participate in it because a lot of the shots that he wanted to do and the sequences that he wanted to do are not in the movie, because basically he left and they did reshoots without him and without a director. Wow. So that's why it feels so flat and so mediocre at times, because sequences were just not directed. A studio producer was on set and was telling the actors what to do and the cameramen what to do.
I just don't know how you let that happen with a property like Alien. How do you let it fall apart that much?
He was
like 26 when he made it.
I don't mean him. I'm saying the studio. How did the studio let this movie fall apart like that?
It was the 90s.
I think it's a case of studio and filmmaker on different wavelengths, and that's why they kind of took it from him, because they didn't like the direction he was going, and when you have two different visions there, you're gonna get a mess. That's not that crazy.
They didn't respect his vision, and which is, to some extent is understandable for a first-time director.
Yeah.
But then don't hire a first-time director for your big franchise movie if you're not going to give them the reins. I think recent times have showed that giving directors creative freedom usually allows even your blockbusters to be better. Because just looking at the Marvel movies, for example, or even the recent Star Wars films, whenever the directors had more creative freedom, the movie is better. And whenever the studios interfered too much, the movie usually is a little worse. And so, that doesn't work all the time because, again, Zack Snyder, I talked about Zack Snyder again.
I think there's a lot of Hugo, I understand your perspective. I think there's a lot of generalizations there, though, that I'm not comfortable making.
There are.
I agree with Josh.
We also don't know. But I have no idea how much producers influenced certain blockbusters recently. Like, we like to think of them as more artistic visions of the director, but I don't know. We don't know that for sure.
But it depends. It depends on which ones you talk about. I do think that the Alien franchise started out as great directors making franchise movies. Making blockbuster movies, because the original Alien, Ridley Scott, is one of the best films, in my opinion, in its genre ever made. And then the sequel, you give it to James Cameron, who just made The Terminator, and he makes this amazing action movie. And then for the third one, you give it to this one-time director who you're not even going to trust with a film. I think that's just bad. That's just bad choices from the studio.
But I think that this experience affected Fincher such that he's more cautious of studio interference and more insistent on creative control, and now he's one of the few directors who can get final cut from a studio nowadays. It's very, very rare now, and it's interesting that Mank begins with the title card explaining the lucrative creative freedom that Orson Welles had in Citizen Kane, and like Fincher's now one of the few guys that has something close to that, because like he didn't, after Alien 3, he's like, no, this isn't going to happen again.
Yeah, he wasn't going to compromise again, and I think it's one of the reasons why his movies are so unique and so recognizable, and whether you like them or not, they're just instantly recognizable.
Can I ask about Fight Club? Yes. It's my favorite Fincher movie. What is it about it that makes it fall short for you guys?
I mean, it's my number 4.
It's my number 2.
My number 3. My number 3. Yeah, okay. I mean, what I think, I think we've all had evolving experiences with Fight Club. I first saw it when I was like, 16, 17, and I felt one way about it, as I think most 16, 17-year-old boys feel about Fight Club. And then, you kind of grow up and see what the movie's doing.
Actually about,
Yeah, I think that might be, I mean, I don't want to generalize. I think that might be a bit of a misunderstood movie.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, that's probably the most misunderstood movie in terms of, like, as far as, like, super popular movies.
Yes. I think that, I think a lot of people, or, again, I don't want to generalize. I think some people may like it for the exact opposite reasons that the movie wants you to like it.
Right.
It kind of takes the opposite, they take the opposite message from what the movie is telling them. And I think that some of its detractors say the same thing. Like, some of the movie's detractors think that it's glorifying X, Y, and Z when it's actually critiquing X, Y, and Z. Which is interesting because Citizen Kane kind of does that. It glorifies a certain lifestyle and mindset and then criticizes it in the back half. But I don't think anyone would ever mistake Citizen Kane with glorifying that first stuff the way that people do for Fight Club.
Right.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think we didn't have time to get to that, but we were going to talk about the themes and
we still have a few minutes.
And
if you want to talk.
Yeah, and
quick.
we could. Yeah, just gonna talk about it really quickly. I think one of the main themes of David Fincher's movies is toxic masculinity, and he puts that at the forefront. And Fight Club, I think, is the one movie that is absolutely about toxic masculinity, and as well as many other things. But he puts that in the foreground in a way that, to someone who doesn't think about it critically, might seem like he's glorifying it and making it look cool. But the point is that Tyler Durden looks cool. He looks like this fun person. He looks like someone
appealing,
you want to be, but then you have to understand that he's awful and you actually don't want to be him.
Yeah, it took me a few viewings to realize that Marla Singer, the Helena Bonham Carter character, is like the most sane person in Fight Club.
Absolutely,
and
yes.
She's really like, I don't know if you'd call her admirable, but she's the closest thing to an admirable character in the movie, the one female character.
Yes, and that's the other thing that I wrote. His movies are absolutely about misogyny, and the female characters in his movies most of the time are the voice of reason. They might be in the background, but they're the voice of reason.
I was going to say, like, how does
Gone Girl
work into that narrative?
No, Gone Girl is an exception. Gone Girl is an exception.
You have Go. What's the actress' name?
The
Carrie
sister.
Carrie Coon.
The sister
Carrie
character.
Coon, sorry.
Yeah.
The wonderful Carrie Coon.
There's very often a female character who's the voice of reason, while the man is obsessive and self-centered and going off on his own deep end and obsessions and and creating the problems that in his life for himself.
I think Fincher movies can be they're easy targets for accusations of misogyny. I'm thinking specifically of Dragon Tattoo and Gone Girl and Fight Club and The Social Network, but I think
that's the point.
They may be easy targets, but they may be a little more complicated than they initially appear from a misogyny perspective. Not saying they aren't misogynistic, but
no, I'm saying they're not. I'm saying they're portraying misogyny to criticize it.
Yes,
but the fact is that it's so visceral and direct the way certain really dark things are portrayed in his movies that it makes it look like, if you don't really think about it, it can make it look like sometimes he's presenting something and glorifying it. Because
they're easy targets for it.
Yeah,
they are absolutely. Like, you have to think about what he's doing and why to understand why I don't think his movies are misogynistic.
Okay.
Where are you guys at on? Go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Where are you guys at on the game?
I had fun with it. I think it would be better. It asks for too much suspension of disbelief.
Yes. It does. Yeah, for sure.
And so that takes me out of it a little bit.
I think that's an interesting case study in how much obsession creeps into all of Fincher's movies. You mentioned toxic masculinity as a recurring theme. I think obsession is the biggest recurring theme.
Yeah.
And
control. Yeah. As well.
And maybe I'm reading into that a little bit because he is, by all accounts, like maybe the most obsessive filmmaker working today, where he gets, he sees details that no one else sees and demands dozens of takes and that kind of thing. So like the game is textually about obsession. I mean that it's a theme that comes Zodiac as well. It comes up a lot in his movies, but that one in particular. I like the game, but I'm kind of with you, Grizz, that it something about it.
What the game is missing is fourth wall breaks. I think if the game was winking and nodding at the camera a little more and acknowledging how ridiculous it actually is, it would work a bit better. But the fact that it takes it so straight and so seriously, after an hour and 20 minutes of tension building, at some point something is going to happen and you're just going to say, oh, that wouldn't happen. That's too much.
It kind of runs
because
into
it goes on for so long.
It runs into the problem that I have with like basically any time anyone supports a conspiracy theory, I'm like, you're telling me this many people are involved and no one is telling?
That's a good critique, for sure.
Okay, well, so what do we got next week, Hugo?
Next week, we thought we were going to talk about another movie that is releasing next week, although it's a really old movie. Well, not really old, but it's an older movie. Basically, next week on the 8th, the final cut or the director's cut or whatever you want to call it of another film that had a lot of studio interference, the Godfather Part III, is releasing. Francis Ford Coppola recut the movie. He re-added in some scenes that were deleted, and apparently the ending is different and the beginning is different. It's like there are major differences to this movie from the original version of Godfather Part 3, and so we thought we would talk about this movie since it's releasing next week as our film to remember, and then do the main topic on the Godfather trilogy and why it's so significant and why it's so important for movies. So cool. I think that's it.
What is? Give us the full title of the recut.
Yes, because that's particularly ridiculous. Because this is the original title that Coppola wanted to give the film, and it's Mario Puzo's The Godfather, Coda, The Death of Michael Corleone. So it's a stupid title, but I think it's insane, but in a good way. But anyway, I love Coppola movies, and I'm always interested when he recuts them because I think he always does some really cool, interesting things that actually change what the film is. Anyway, so that's our topic next week.
Cool.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. I remembered to say
boilerplate. Woo, boilerplate. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
All
we
right.
didn't forget.
Happy Mank week, guys.
Happy Mank
Happy Mank week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.